Not Proud by John Donne is my poem. So death is something that everyone fears about.
That's why we have the Grim Reaper figure, something that comes to get us. Death might relate to hell or punishment and all sorts of things that normally frighten people. However, in this poem called Death Be Not Proud by John Donne, he portrays death as something weak and pitiful that we should not fear. Now, this is the poem. First of all, let's take a look at the title. When I first read this title, I thought, why would death be proud anyways? For taking away people's lives? And then after I read this poem, I felt like death was being personified in this poem as someone that has pride in having the ability to take away the souls and to end lives. As if death is a serial killer that has pride in his or her so-called accomplishments. Now let's take a closer look at this poem to figure out the deeper meaning. In lines 1 to 2, the speaker tells Death, which seems to be personified throughout this whole poem as a human figure being taunted, that Death should not have pride in what he does, even if some people fear Death as being mighty and dreadful. The speaker makes it clear to Death that he's not powerful nor fearful, because the truth is that Death actually has no power. In line 4, the speaker mentions that Death is poor, because he doesn't have the actual power to kill the speaker. Ironic, isn't it? Death cannot bring death. The following lines explain this a bit more. In line 5, the speaker mentions the similarity of death to rest and sleep since all three of them bring comfort at the end and relieves people. Not so fearful, is it? The speaker even describes death with the word pleasure in line 6. From line 9, there's a shift from line 7 and H, which slightly empowered death by saying that it's inevitable. From line 9, the speaker starts mocking Death straightly, as if he's teasing Death about his weakness. The speaker in lines 9 to 12 compares death to many other incidents and causes that will also kill us, even if death might not come to find us. The speaker calls death a slave, as if death just does the afterwork for faith, chance, kings, and desperate men, which I have perceived as people who want to die early, such as people who commit suicide. If fate or chance or people themselves decide that it's time to die, death then comes to deliver the soul. Death is even weaker than a simple king that could just order people to die. This shows that death doesn't really have the power to kill at all. Death kills just like any other poison, war, and sickness as mentioned in line 10, and sleep that death brings us can also be brought by poppies or drugs, and charms that are mentioned in line 11. Lines 9 through 12 completely weakened Death and mocked Death into becoming someone that's helpless and weak. Someone almost pathetic because killing that Death does is not even really his power, and there are many things that kill other than death. In the last two lines, there's another shift from mocking death into praising the actual existence of end in life. After dying, which is portrayed so peacefully as one short sleep in line 13, the speaker says that we wake eternally. Deriving from the fact that John Donne was a priest, I guess that this represents heaven where people, because of Jesus' resurrection, never really die. People live eternally in heaven after death, which makes line 14 make sense, since if people live eternally after a short sleep on a path to meeting God, death's existence means no more. The last line that says, "Death, thou shalt die," pinpoints the final meaning that death doesn't exist, and has no need to exist since people never die. Even if they stop breathing, that people perceive as death, it's not actually death because people, after the short amount of break, get to go to heaven and live eternally. So overall, the poem summarizes the speaker's arguments on why death shall not be feared. Death is just a subject to fate and human will, since people can kill themselves whenever they want to, and death is just one thing that amongst many other things that kill, such as war, illness, and poison. Even the short sleep that the existence of death might bring is not powerful, since many other things can bring sleep, such as poppies, charms, and medicine. This poem also includes the sense of heaven that people could live eternally next to God. It tells people not to fear death, since it's just a short pause on the way to God. Death leads to an eternal life of salvation. That's what the author is trying to say. So it's something great, fantastically great. If we look at the rhyming scheme, we could see that this poem is both Italian and Shakespearean sonnet. It starts out with ABBA, which is Italian rhyme, but goes on with the Shakespearean rhyme. The last two lines don't really fit into either of the rhyme schemes, and I think John Donne purposely did this to separate the two lines from the whole poem. The last two lines withhold the great meaning of salvation, which is quite different from the whole mocking attitude that does in the beginning. The different rhyme scheme gives more emphasis and makes the reader pay more bit attention to the greater meaning of death. Death is almost used as a metaphor, as a route to eternal salvation, which supports why death shall not be proud for being fearful to people, nor having the power to kill, because it doesn't kill. For other literary aspects, there's lots of cacophonic words to make other things sound harsher than death, such as sickness and charms. There's also lots of alliteration, such as M's and much more must, or lots of T's in those whom thou thinkst thou, and so forth. There's much more, such as short sleep, we wake, and they all help the poem flow better. So if we now look back at the title, we now get why death shall not be proud. I chose this poem because I was really interested by John Donne's argument, as I am a Christian myself. Death really might not be something that we should fear if it's something that takes us closer to God or eternal salvation. But I still think death is scary. I even agreed to his supporting evidence, though. Here is John Donne's Death Be Not Proud once again as I read it. Death, be not proud. Though some have called thee mighty and dreadful, for thou art not so. For those whom thou think'st thou dost overthrow, die not, poor Death, nor yet canst thou kill me. From rest and sleep, which but thy pictures be, much pleasure then from thee, much more must flow. And soonest our best men with thee do go, rest of their bones and souls' delivery. Thou art slave to fate, chance, kings, and desperate men, and dost to poison, war, and sickness dwell. And poppy or charms can make us sleep as well, and better than thy stroke, why swell'st thou then? One short sleep past, we wake eternally, and death shall be no more. Death, thou shalt die